For years, people have imagined Vikings on their longships sitting around a warm fire, roasting meat, while crossing icy northern seas. It's a dramatic picture, and it feels logical. Warriors need strength, and strength needs food. But this is one of the biggest misconceptions about Viking seafaring. Because the truth is this: Vikings did not cook on their ships at all. Not even once during a voyage. Not even just a small fire. Not even only during calm seas. The idea is a fantasy created by modern movies, not reality. And once you see the design of a longship, the materials used, and the conditions at sea, the myth falls apart instantly. If a Viking crew tried to light a fire on deck just one time, the result wouldn't be cooked food. It would be a burning ship and a dead crew. So the real question isn't, how did Vikings cook on board? It's, how did Vikings survive days or even weeks at sea without ever cooking a single meal? And the answer is far more interesting and far more brutal than any Hollywood scene.
The fire problem. To understand why cooking on a Viking longship was impossible, you have to look at the physical reality of these vessels. Viking ships were built almost entirely from oak planks sealed with tar and pitch, both substances that ignite dangerously fast. Just a single spark could turn a longship into a floating torch in seconds. And then there's the wind. A longship on open water faced constant, unpredictable gusts, hitting the deck from all directions. Any flame would instantly scatter embers across rope, sails, wool clothing, and tarred wood. But the biggest problem is space.
Viking longships had no enclosed cooking area, no safe corner, no iron firebox, nothing. The deck was open and crowded with weapons, shield racks, barrels, personal belongings, sleeping areas, and up to 40-60 men in tight formation. There was literally no room to safely burn anything. Even Roman and Greek ships, much larger and with more enclosed space, avoided open fire for the same reason. Simply put, fire at sea was suicide. Vikings knew it, so they designed their entire food strategy around one brutal fact: there would be absolutely no cooking until they reached land.
The cold food reality. So what did Vikings actually eat while sailing for days across freezing northern waters? They relied on cold, preserved, dense food. Nothing warm, nothing fresh, nothing that required preparation. The typical Viking sea diet included hard flatbread, hardtack, nearly unbreakable, almost immortal, perfect for long voyages. Dried fish, usually cod or herring, tough, salty, but high in protein. Smoked or dried meat, rarely fresh, usually chewy and extremely salty. Sea butter, thick, high fat, and sometimes rancid, but excellent for calories. Fermented foods, sour, preserved vegetables that could survive weeks. Cheese, tough, aged, travel-resistant varieties. Ale or buttermilk, safer than drinking raw seawater, contaminated water.
None of this required cooking. None of it was comfortable, and none of it tasted good. The goal wasn't enjoyment. The goal was survival. Meals were eaten quickly, usually standing or sitting on the wet deck, often while rowing. Vikings weren't dining. They were fueling their bodies just enough to stay alive, row for hours, and withstand the cold sea winds. On long voyages, men often lost weight, energy, and morale. Hunger was normal. Warm food was a fantasy.
What they actually ate on a long ship. Contrary to Hollywood image of Vikings endlessly feasting on roasted meat, the diet at sea was far more practical and far less glamorous. When they set sail for days or weeks, their food had to survive moisture, salt air, rocking waves, and constant movement. Their core staples were ship-friendly foods: hard bread or hardtack, dense, dry, almost rock-hard barley or rye biscuits that could last months. Vikings often softened them in water, broth, or beer. Dried fish, cod, herring, or salmon, cured with salt or air-dried until almost leathery. Dried meat, usually pork or beef, salted and hung until hard. Butter and lard, calorie-dense fats that could survive storage, often kept in leather bags. Cheese, hard, aged cheeses that resisted spoilage. Ale or mead, safer to drink than water due to natural fermentation.
When conditions allowed, they also ate onions, root vegetables, dried berries, and porridge made from oats or barley. This diet might sound basic, but it was high in fat, salt, and protein, exactly what a Viking needed while rowing for hours in freezing winds. What's surprising is how deliberately engineered their food storage was. Vikings didn't just throw supplies into a chest. They used sealed barrels, waxed bags, woven nets, and even hollowed wooden boxes to protect food from humidity and pests. Every meal was a carefully calculated resource, not a feast, but fuel.
The clever no-fire cooking tricks. With no open flames allowed on deck, the Viking crew had to get creative, and this is where their ingenuity really shows. 1. Watertight clay or stone containers. They often carried pre-cooked stews sealed inside clay pots. These weren't heated on board. Instead, the residual cooking and fermentation made them edible for days. Think of it like ancient Viking meal prep. 2. Hot stones, only used before departure or at shore. Before leaving port or after briefly landing, Vikings heated stones in a fire, placed them into wooden bowls or pots, and poured water over food to cook it. On the ship, they didn't reheat the stones, but they ate whatever was left from the last stone boil.
3. Sour stews that never went bad. Old Nordic sour porridges and stews fermented slowly in sealed containers. They were tangy, thick, and long-lasting, similar to Korean kimchi or African sour porridge. Vikings could eat it cold, straight from the pot. 4. Cold steeping. Some foods simply soaked themselves edible. Grains, dry bread, dried fish. A cup of cold water or ale was enough to soften them after a few minutes. 5. Raw consumption. Vikings occasionally ate dried or salted food raw. It wasn't delicious, but it worked. 6. Fat as a meal base. Lard and butter were added to almost everything to make it more filling. Fat was the Viking version of high-calorie ship fuel. Together, these tricks made cooking unnecessary. Survival came from preparation, preservation, and practicality. Eating on a dangerous moving ship. Imagine trying to cook during a storm. Now imagine doing it on a narrow boat carved from a single oak tree. Eating on a Viking longship was a logistical nightmare. The ship was always moving. Waves hit from every direction. The deck tilted, shook, and vibrated. Anything you dropped went straight into the sea. Food was stored low for stability. Barrels and containers stayed near the keel, meaning someone had to crawl or squat to access them. This was often the job of the youngest crew member. Meals happened during shifts. Half the crew rowed, half rested. Meals were staggered, fast and quiet. No big gatherings, no horns of ale raised in celebration. Everything was cold. Except for food prepared before departure or heated on shore, all meals on the open sea were cold. Cold stew, cold bread, cold fish. Mess kits were minimal. Each Viking had a wooden bowl, a wooden spoon, and a small personal knife. Nothing more. Meals were eaten fast. It was usually a scoop of stew, a piece of bread, a slice of dried fish, a mouthful of ale, then straight back to rowing. Food wasn't entertainment.
It was fuel to keep the war machine moving.
What happened when they finally reached shore? The moment they reached land, even for an hour, everything changed. Fire returned. A driftwood fire or portable clay stove was lit immediately. Crew members heated water, boiled grains, and cooked meat. The pot was king. Vikings preferred a single massive pot, shared by everyone. Thick stews, porridge, boiled meat, beer-warmed bread. This was the first hot meal after days at sea. Foraging and hunting. If time allowed, Vikings searched for edible plants, shellfish, small game, and freshwater fish. Anything to break the monotony of dried food. Spirits lifted. A hot meal meant morale improved instantly. Songs were sung, weapons repaired, plans discussed. Landing, even briefly, reset the physical and mental exhaustion of the voyage.